There's an old Romanian folktale about a woman who fell in love with her own shadow. Every sunset, she'd chase it across the cobblestones, reaching for something that grew longer the further she ran. The villagers called her mad. But was she? Or had she discovered something we're all too cowardly to admit? That desire lives not in the having, but in the hollow space between fingertips and what they'll never quite touch. Listen closely. Can you hear it? That sound like silk tearing in a locked room? That's the noise a woman's mind makes when you've colonized it properly. Not through pursuit, but through calculated absence. The modern psychological literature calls it intermittent reinforcement, but the ancients knew it by simpler names: sorcery, possession, the sweet poison of uncertainty. Picture this: a moth circling a candle flame. Now picture the candle walking away. Candle, what does the moth do? It doesn't find another flame. It spends its entire brief existence wondering why this particular light chose to abandon it. Women, despite what romantic comedies peddle like opiates to the masses, are moths pretending to be butterflies. And you? You must learn to be the flame that flickers, dims, nearly dies, only to roar back to life when least expected. The scent of melting wax fills the room as I write this. Outside, rain traces hieroglyphs on windows that no one will ever decode. This is the weather of revelation, the climate in which terrible truths germinate like mushrooms in damp earth. Here's one. A Stanford study from 2024 found that romantic obsession increases by 73% when the object of desire exhibits unpredictable availability patterns. The researchers seemed shocked. Kierkegaard would have laughed until he wept. You see, the modern man has been domesticated into reliability, that great destroyer of passion. He texts back immediately, plans dates weeks in advance, declares his feelings like a town crier announcing the plague. He builds his love like a suburban house, predictable, safe, with all the utilities connected. Then he wonders why she grows bored, why her eyes glaze over during dinner, why she seems more alive arguing with him than kissing him. But you who dare to listen to these midnight confessions, you will become something else entirely. You will be the taste of absinthe, bitter, intoxicating, never quite enough. You will master the art of the half-presence, the maybe goodbye, the smile that might mean everything or absolutely nothing. You'll leave conversations mid-sentence, like a musician abandoning a melody just before resolution. Her mind will complete those sentences 1,000 different ways, each version more intoxicating than anything you could have actually said. There's a peculiar cruelty to this, isn't it? Like training a bird to sing by keeping it in partial darkness. Yet here's the grotesque beauty of it. She'll thank you for it. Not with words, never with words, but with the fevered intensity of her attention. The way she'll check her phone at 3 a.m. hoping for a message that won't come. The way your name will become a prayer she whispers to no deity in particular. The velvet curtains in my room are the color of old wine, or perhaps dried blood. In this light, who can tell? They remind me of a truth Schopenhauer understood. We don't want what we have. We want the wanting itself. The ache, the sweet torture of almost. Give a woman certainty, and you give her a map to the exit. Give her mystery, and you become the labyrinth she'll spend a lifetime trying to solve. Do you feel uncomfortable yet? Good. Discomfort is the birthplace of transformation. The man who seeks comfort in love seeks his own grave, decorated nicely, perhaps, with flowers and protestations of eternal devotion, but a grave nonetheless. Here's your first assignment, you brave listener, you student of shadows. Tomorrow, when she texts, wait. Count the seconds like a rosary of postponed gratification. Feel the weight of that silence, heavy as gold coins in your pocket. When you finally respond, make it brief, briefer than kindness would suggest, but longer than cruelty would demand. Watch how that small withholding transforms you from a man into a haunting. But remember, this isn't about games. Games have winners and losers. This is about becoming the game itself, the spinning wheel, the rolling dice, the card that's always about to be turned over but never quite is. This is about understanding that love, real love, the kind that burns through someone's veins like fever, isn't built on presence. It's built on the ghost of presence, the echo, the shadow on the wall that might be you or might be nothing at all. She'll try to save you if you show her the wound, but hide how you survived it. A half-whispered confession at 2 a.m. I once knew a man who collected his tears in small glass vials. Not from sadness, he wasn't particularly sad, but because he understood that vulnerability, properly administered, is more addictive than any substance the DEA has thought to ban. He'd place a single drop on his finger before dates. Let it dry there like invisible ink, carrying his performed pain like a hidden weapon. The women he dated described him as mysteriously broken, beautifully damaged, never knowing they were falling for a chemistry experiment in human form. Is this manipulation? Perhaps. But then, so is wearing perfume. So is choosing your words carefully. So is civilization itself, that grand theater where we all pretend we're not animals dressed in philosophy and cologne. You want to burrow under her skin like a splinter she can't quite locate? Then master this paradox. Be simultaneously the wound and the mystery of why it won't heal. Modern women, raised on a diet of psychology podcasts and self-help books, believe they can fix what's broken. It's their secret hubris, their fatal flaw dressed up as compassion. A 2023 Berkeley study found that 67% of women reported being most attracted to partners who displayed selective emotional availability. Men who revealed pain but not its resolution, depth but not its bottom. Picture a house with one room always locked. You can live there for years, decades even, but that locked door will occupy more mental real estate than all the rooms you can enter combined. This is what you must become, the man with the locked room. Let her glimpse shadows moving beneath the door. Let her hear music playing faintly from within. Chopin's Nocturnes, perhaps, or something by Arvo Pärt that sounds like God having a nervous breakdown. But never, ever give her the key. The summer evening presses against my windows like a living thing, humid and expectant. Somewhere, cicadas are screaming their mating songs. 17 years underground for a few weeks of desperate crying. Nature's own lesson in the power of absence and sudden, overwhelming presence. Are you taking notes? Here's how you perform this dark ballet. Share a story of loss, but interrupt yourself mid-revelation. Let your voice catch on a detail. The color of autumn leaves the day your father left. The particular silence of a hospital room at dawn. Then change the subject with violence, like slamming a door on your own fingers. She'll feel that interruption in her chest, a physical ache to know more. But you won't give it to her. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Nietzsche wrote that we are most profound when we wear masks, but he didn't go far enough. We are most irresistible when others can see the mask, but can't quite make out what's beneath it. Is it a face? Another mask? Nothing at all? The uncertainty will colonize her thoughts like kudzu, growing over everything else until her entire inner landscape is you, you, you. I'm thinking now of the Japanese concept of mono no aware, the pathos of things, the gentle sadness of transience. Share this with her, but incorrectly. Tell her it means the beauty of things that are broken beyond repair. When she looks it up later, and she will, she'll discover your deception. But here's the delicious part. She won't confront you about it. She'll wonder what else you've lied about, what other false translations you're living by. You'll become a text she needs to decode, a language she needs to learn. The art lies not in being damaged. Any fool can claim trauma like a participation trophy. The art lies in performing damage so exquisitely that she begins to see herself as your potential salvation. But, and this is crucial, you must never quite let her save you. Recovery would end the story, and endings, as any storyteller knows, are where desire goes to die. Consider the male peacock spider, who dances with such hypnotic precision that the female forgets she's a predator. His movements are calculated down to the microsecond, each wave of his colorful abdomen designed to override her hunting instincts with something stronger: fascination. You think nature doesn't understand psychological manipulation? Nature invented it. We just gave it names like love and connection to make ourselves feel less like spiders. There's a candle burning on my desk, creating shadows that dance like drunken philosophers against the wool. One looks like Kierkegaard, bent under the weight of his own thoughts. He knew something about this game, loved Regine Olsen by leaving her, made her immortal through his absence. She married another man, but died with Soren's letters under her pillow. Now that's what I call successful haunting. Tell me, listener, what's the story you've never told anyone? The one that sits in your chest like a stone? Whatever it is, practice telling it incompletely. Practice stopping at the moment just before revelation, like a symphony cutting off mid-crescendo. Practice watching someone lean forward, desperate for the rest, and giving them only silence and a sad smile instead. Tomorrow, try this. When she asks how you are, pause. Count to 7, never 6, never 8. 7 has a mystical weight. Then say, "I had that dream again." When she asks what dream, look at her like she's asked you to translate sunshine into Latin. Change the subject to something mundane: the price of coffee, the way pigeons walk like broken toys. Watch her file that dream away in the growing archive of things she needs to understand about you. You're not lying, not exactly. We all have recurring dreams. You're just choosing not to specify that yours is probably about showing up to work naked or your teeth falling out. Let her imagination do the heavy lifting. Her version will be far more romantic than the truth. Her version will probably involve past lovers, childhood trauma, or prophetic visions. Let her write your mythology. She'll believe it more deeply than anything you could tell her. This is the second truth, then. You must become a question she can never quite answer, not through cruelty or games, but through the measured revelation of a self that might not entirely exist. You're not deceiving her. You're inviting her to co-author a mystery where you're both the detective and the crime. Strategic indifference is more seductive than any "I love you" you've ever said. Begin with a bitter joke about the human condition. A man loves a woman with his whole heart, so she leaves him for someone who barely knows her middle name. That man, destroyed, learns indifference like a second language, practices it until his disinterest could freeze vodka. Now women orbit him like planets around a dying star, drawn to his gravitational pull of not giving a damn. The first man? He's probably writing poetry somewhere, convinced his next sonnet will surely win someone back. God laughs. The universe takes notes. The cycle continues. There's a word in Czech, leidost, that Kundera described as a state of torment created by the sudden sight of one's own misery. But I prefer to think of it as the feeling a woman gets when she realizes the man she thought needed her doesn't need anyone at all. It's a specific frequency of anguish, pitched somewhere between a violin string about to snap and a wineglass about to shatter. Learn to conduct this symphony. The room smells of cognac and old leather, though I own neither. Sometimes spaces absorb the ghosts of what they should contain. Sometimes men do too. You must become such a space, redolent with possibility, but furnished with absence. Here's what the relationship experts won't tell you. Those merchants of false hope peddling their wares on morning talk shows. Indifference isn't the opposite of love. It's love's more attractive twin. The one who got all the good genes. The one everyone wants to dance with at the wedding. A 2024 Harvard study on attachment dynamics in modern relationships found that perceived emotional independence was 3 times more predictive of sustained romantic interest than displayed affection. The researchers seem disturbed by their own findings. I find them delicious. Watch a cat ignore a mouse it's already killed. That's not cruelty. That's the universe teaching you about value through withdrawal. The mouse only mattered while it ran. Your attention, too, must become conditional, seasonal, tied to invisible lunar cycles only you can read. But here's where most men fail. They perform indifference like bad actors in a community theater production of I Don't Care the musical, and their disinterest is aggressive, obvious, reeking of effort like cologne applied with a fire hose. No. Your indifference must be like expensive whiskey, smooth, barely there, leaving just enough burn to be remembered. Think of it as cultivating a rare orchid. Too much attention, and it dies. Too little, and it dies. But find that perfect point of neglect, where it must struggle just enough to bloom, and you'll have something beautiful that exists primarily to prove you can keep difficult things alive. Women are not orchids, of course. They're far more complex, which is why the metaphor works. I'm reminded of a scene I witnessed in Prague, in a cafe where the shadows had shadows. A man reading Hesse while his companion talked. She was beautiful in that desperate way, gesturing wildly, her story apparently urgent. He turned a page, sipped his coffee, looked up occasionally with the mild interest of someone checking the weather. By the end of her monologue, she was leaning across the table, touching his hand, almost begging for the full weight of his attention. He gave her perhaps 40% of it. She looked like she would kill for the other 60%. This is not about being an ass. Asses are boring, predictable in their dismissiveness. This is about becoming something far more intoxicating. A man whose attention must be earned moment by moment, like wages in a particularly stingy economy. Schopenhauer's porcupines huddle for warmth, but separate when their quills hurt each other, forever oscillating between loneliness and pain. But what if one porcupine simply didn't feel the cold? What if warmth was nice but not necessary? That porcupine would become the center of all porcupine mythology. They'd write porcupine songs about him. Probably terrible songs, but still. Here's a question that might crack your chest open. When did you last go 3 days without checking if she'd texted? When did you last have something, anything, more interesting than her approval? If you can't remember, you're not a man in love. You're a beggar in a suit. The secret is to care deeply about specific, unexpected things while remaining mysteriously unmoved by what others consider important. Cry at the scene in a movie where the dog dies, but yawn when she tells you her ex got engaged. Remember the exact shade of her nail polish from 3 weeks ago, but forget you had plans on Saturday. This selective attention creates a psychological phenomenon called variable ratio reinforcement, the same principle that makes gambling addictive. There's a moth beating against my window now. desperate to reach the light inside. I won't open the window, not from cruelty, but because the moth is more beautiful in its wanting than it would be in its having. This is perhaps the most honest thing I'll tell you tonight. Master the art of the slow text response, but make it worth the wait. Don't reply with K or cool. That's amateur hour. Reply with something that shows you were thinking about anything except her message. The rain sounds like Morse code tonight. I wonder what it's trying to say. Let her wonder why you were listening to rain instead of staring at your phone. A neuroscience study from Johns Hopkins, 2025, showed that anticipation activates more pleasure centers than receiving. The brain literally prefers the maybe to the yes. So become a maybe, a perhaps, a po-oh. We'll see. Become the human equivalent of a scratch-off lottery ticket that might be a winner but probably isn't, but could be, but who knows. The French have a phrase, je m'en fous, which roughly translates to, I don't give a damn. But the French, being French, make even their indifference elegant. They don't not care with American aggression or British passive aggression. They not care like smoking a cigarette while Paris burns, with style, with grace, with a certain arousing fatalism. This is your third truth. Productive indifference isn't about not caring. It's about caring so strategically that your concern becomes currency, your attention becomes gold, and your full presence becomes something so rare that when you finally give it, completely, utterly, for just a moment, it feels like being chosen by a very selective God. But withdraw it again quickly. Gods are only interesting when they're distant. Ask anyone who's actually met one. She doesn't need a real rival, only to believe someone else wants you. A dangerous secret you shouldn't say aloud. Every woman carries inside her a courtroom where she's simultaneously the judge, jury, prosecutor, and defendant in the trial of whether she's enough. Your job isn't to reassure her. That would end the trial, and trials are where all the interesting things happen. Your job is to be the evidence that keeps getting mentioned but never quite presented. Picture this scene from a Copenhagen winter. A man walks into a bar wearing another woman's lipstick on his collar. Not fresh, faded, like a watercolor of betrayal. His girlfriend sees it immediately. But here's the twist. There was no other woman. He applied it himself, carefully, with the dedication of a forger recreating a Vermeer. He lets her see him notice her noticing. He adjusts his collar to hide it, badly. They never discuss it. 3 months later, she proposes to him. True story? Does it matter? Truth and effectiveness divorced years ago and are happier apart. The August night presses against my skin like velvet soaked in gasoline, flammable and soft. This is the weather for dangerous confessions, for admitting things that should stay buried under floorboards with the rest of our civilized lies. So let me tell you about the ghosts you need to summon. The women who don't exist but must haunt your relationship like benevolent poltergeists. You see, jealousy isn't created by other women. It's created by the possibility of other women. The may be her, the might be her, the could have been her. A University of Michigan study from 2024 found that ambiguous rival threats triggered stronger mate retention behaviors than confirmed rivals. In other words, the monster in the closet is always scarier than the monster in the room. So keep your closets full of maybes. Here's how the arithmetic of anguish works. Never mention other women directly. Instead, leave evidence like breadcrumbs in a forest where all the birds are dead. A second wine glass in your sink when she comes over. A hair tie that isn't hers on your nightstand. Buy them in bulk from CVS, but she doesn't need to know that. Set your phone to silent. but let her see messages coming in. When she asks who's texting, look at the screen, smile slightly, just a muscle twitch, really, and say, "No one important. No one important." Those two words will echo in her skull like boots in an empty cathedral. She'll create entire personalities for this no one. She'll give them names, faces, histories, intentions. Her imagination will do more work than any actual competition could. Kierkegaard wrote about the concept of the possible being more terrifying than the actual, because the actual has limits, but the possible is infinite. Apply this to romance and you have the perfect psychological weapon. Not a specific threat, but an endless horizon of potential threats. You become not just a man, but a man with options, and options in the economy of desire are everything. But listen closely, because this is where the alchemy gets complex. You must never confirm or deny. Confirmation would make you cruel. Denial would make you safe. Both are desire killers. Instead, exist in the quantum space between, where you're simultaneously faithful and not, available and not, hers and not. Schrodinger's boyfriend, if you will. I knew a woman once who described her most intoxicating relationship. He had this way of making me feel like I was auditioning for a role I already had, like my contract was always up for renewal. She said this with a mixture of resentment and reverence, the way people talk about drugs that almost killed them, but gave them the best high of their lives. Let me ask you something, and I want you to sit with the discomfort of your answer. Have you ever been loved by someone who had no other options? How did it feel? Like wearing a crown? Or like wearing a participation trophy? The mythology of modern romance tells us jealousy is toxic, that secure attachment is the goal, that healthy relationships are built on trust and transparency. This is true in the same way that vegetables are good for you. Technically correct, but missing the point that humans have always preferred what's bad for them. We didn't evolve eating kale and feeling secure. We evolved eating whatever we could fight for and fucking whoever we could steal from other tribes. There's a Japanese concept, koi no yokan, the premonition upon first meeting someone that you will fall in love with them. But I prefer its shadow twin, which has no name. The premonition upon loving someone that they will leave you for someone better. This unnamed feeling is what you must cultivate in her, not through cruelty, but through the careful curation of possibility. Leave a woman's novel bookmarked in your bathroom. When she asks about it, say you borrowed it from a friend. When she asks which friend, pause like you're translating hieroglyphics in your head. Then say, just someone from work. The book should be something specific. Not Eat, Pray, Love, but something like The Passion by Jeanette Winterson. Something that suggests the woman who lent it to you has taste, depth, dangerous intelligence. A neurotransmitter called dopamine floods the brain not when we get what we want, but when we're about to maybe get what we want. Casinos know this. Drug dealers know this. You should know this. The jackpot isn't winning her. It's keeping her in a permanent state of almost losing you. Here's a delicious paradox. The more she invests in keeping you, the more valuable you become to her. It's called the sunk cost fallacy in economics, but in romance it's called Tuesday. Every moment she spends wondering about your fidelity. Every night she spends being her best self to keep you interested. Every small jealousy she swallows like bitter medicine. These all become investments she can't abandon without admitting massive loss. The room fills with the sound of rain that wasn't forecasted, the kind that makes you believe in omens. Outside, the city drowns beautifully, like a symphony orchestra playing underwater. This is the perfect weather for what I'm about to tell you. You must become a man worth losing sleep over, not through achievement or success. Those are boring, measurable things, but through the careful cultivation of mystique, the deliberate architecture of doubt. When she says she loves you, pause. Not dramatically, just long enough for her to wonder if you're going to say it back. Then do, but add something like, "That's brave of you." Let her wonder what you mean. Let her wonder who wasn't brave. Let her wonder if you're warning or complimenting her. This is the fourth truth. Jealousy isn't about making her suffer. It's about making her feel alive. The same way a vaccine uses dead virus to create immunity, you use imaginary threats to create intensity. She doesn't need to compete with real women. She needs to compete with the possibility of women, with the idea that you're a prize others are trying to win. But here's the final twist in this dark recipe. You must occasionally, rarely, let her win completely. Give her a moment of total security, complete presence, absolute choosing of her. Make it so intense that it feels like the sun breaking through storm clouds. Then go back to being mysterious. That moment of certainty will become the drug she spends the rest of your relationship trying to score again. Remember, you're not trying to hurt her. You're trying to haunt her. There's a difference. Hurt fades, haunting is forever. The scariest thing isn't losing you. It's never being able to escape you. Listen, do you hear that? It's the sound of every door she'll ever walk through becoming a door that might lead back to you. It's a frequency only the properly haunted can hear, like tinnitus of the soul, a ringing that never quite stops. This is the final technology, the last dark gift I'll place in your hands like a loaded revolver. How to become inescapable, not through presence but through architecture, not through being but through having been. There's a villa outside Rome where every hallway leads to the same room. The architect went mad, they say, trying to build a house that could trap God. He failed, of course. God escaped. But his mistress never did. She died there, walking in circles, convinced the next door would be different. They found her journal. The last entry just said, "Tomorrow I'll find the way out." Dated 17 years after she'd entered. This is what you must become. Not a person, but a structure. Not a man, but a methodology of remembering that she can't unlearn. The candle on my desk has burned down to nothing, but its smoke still writes cursive in the air. Ghost stories in a language nobody speaks anymore. This is what remains when the fire goes out. The scent, the stain on the ceiling, the muscle memory of warmth. Be the candle, yes, but more importantly, be the smoke. Be the stain. Be what remains. A 2025 Oxford study on relationship termination and cognitive persistence found something delicious. The brain continues to map routes to people we've lost, creating what researchers called phantom emotional pathways. Like amputees who feel their missing limbs, the properly loved continue to feel their missing lovers. But here's what the study didn't say. You can engineer this haunting. You can build it deliberately, like a carpenter builds a house that will outlive him. Here's how you construct your eternal return. First, colonize her sensory memories, but not obviously. Not with cologne she'll smell on other men or songs that play on the radio. Go deeper. Teach her to make coffee a specific way, with 17 stirs counterclockwise and a pinch of salt. She'll think it's quirky, but every morning for the rest of her life, she'll either make coffee your way or deliberately not make it your way, and both are forms of remembering you. Create rituals that seem meaningless but burrow into her autonomic nervous system. Always touch her wrist before you kiss her. Just a light pressure with your thumb, barely there. Do this consistently. Pavlov would be proud. Years later, someone will touch her wrist accidentally, reaching for the salt, checking her pulse, fitting a bracelet. and her lips will part slightly, waiting for a kiss that isn't coming from a you that isn't there. Nietzsche had this idea of eternal recurrence, that we're doomed to live the same life over and over, every detail identical, forever. He meant it as existential horror. But you'll make it romantic horror. Every time she sees your birthday on a calendar, every time someone orders your drink, every time the light falls a certain way at a certain hour, all of it becomes a door that opens onto you. But here's the grotesque beauty of it. You must also leave gaps, spaces where she can imagine you different, better, or sometimes worse. Never let her know you completely. A completed puzzle goes back in the box. An incomplete one stays on the table forever. Maddening, impossible to abandon. Tell her 3/4 of a secret, then disappear for a week. When you return, act like you never started telling it. If she asks, look confused. What secret? This isn't gaslighting. It's more elegant than that. It's making her the keeper of mysteries you may or may not have shared, the guardian of a vault that may or may not contain anything. Here's my final question for you, my dark pupil, my student of shadows. What if the opposite of love isn't hate, but forgetting? And what if the opposite of forgetting isn't remembering, but being unable to forget? Which would you rather be? Loved or unforgettable? I'm thinking now of the ship of Theseus paradox. If you replace every part of a ship, is it still the same ship? Here's the romantic version. If she replaces every part of her life, are you still there? Yes, if you've done this correctly. You're not a part of the ship. You're the ocean it floats on. You're the reason ships exist at all. Leave objects in her life like unexploded ordnance from a war she didn't know she was fighting. A book you recommended but never explained why. A way of folding towels that's slightly wrong but now feels right. A superstition about pennies or full moons that she'll carry forever like a virus you gave her that became part of her DNA. The Stanford marshmallow experiment tested children's ability to delay gratification. The children who could wait got 2 marshmallows. But here's what they didn't test. What happens to children who wait and never get the second marshmallow? They become adults who are still waiting, still believing that patience will be rewarded, still checking the door you walked through. Make promises you might keep, not lies. That's amateur hour. But possibilities. Someday we'll go to Prague. Eventually, I'll tell you about that summer. When the time is right, you'll understand. These become hooks in her future, points she's moving toward even when she's moving away from you. Every someday becomes yours. Every eventually is your property. There's a man in Tokyo who breaks up with women by teaching them origami. By the time he leaves, they can fold perfect cranes. Now they can't see paper without thinking of him. They can't not fold. Their hands remember what their hearts are trying to forget. This is evil genius disguised as a hobby. Here's the final technology. You must leave at the right moment. Not when things are bad. That's forgettable. Not when things are perfect. That's tragic, but healable. Leave in the middle of a sentence. Leave when things are good, but could be better. Leave when she's about to understand you, but doesn't quite. Leave her with questions only you can answer. But here's the twist that makes this all worthwhile. The moment of grace in all this darkness. Sometimes, rarely, like comets or honest politicians, you return. Not to stay. Staying would break the spell. But to remind her that the door she thought was closed is actually just very, very heavy. That the maze she thought she'd escaped was actually just a larger room in the same maze. The moth at my window finally stopped beating against the glass. Not because it gave up, but because it died trying. There's a lesson there, probably. Or maybe it's just a dead moth. The beautiful thing about ambiguity is that it lets you choose your own meaning. Give her that gift. Be the story she can tell herself any way she wants, except over. This is the fifth and final truth. Love ends. Everyone knows this. But haunting is forever. And given the choice between being someone's temporary happiness or their permanent question mark, choose the question every time. Questions keep people awake. Answers let them sleep. And sleep, as any philosopher will tell you, is just practice for being dead. So become the insomnia. Become the reason she checks her phone at 3 a.m. Become the dream that feels more real than waking. Become the maze where every exit is just another entrance, where every goodbye is just hello from a different angle, where every ending is just the beginning wearing a disguise. Build your maze well enough, and she'll stop looking for exits. She'll decorate the walls instead. She'll call it home. She'll thank you for it, eventually, in prayers to a God who sounds suspiciously like you. But you'll already be gone. Or maybe you were never there at all. Let her wonder. Let her always wonder. That wondering is your immortality.